Why, hello there. Welcome to another transmission, a working class observation from the wacko, weirdo, rebel scum, Jedi hero, Andrew, recorded. I'm not doing a live transmission today, it's too much effort, and I'd much rather just get into the meat, which may be empty calories, but that's really up to you in your own digestion. Drink more water. I got a couple of things that I want to get into, but I just kind of scampered over here into Reddit. But I'm going through a bit of self-discovery. I don't really know what the channel is going to be about. I know that there's a lot more that I want to do. It's just, it originally started out as just reading out, like, different articles and getting, you know, a little bit of perspective and context in articles in the news, and I maybe even started with just ramblings. It's always been ramblings, but I've been trying to figure out what is the drive to the microphone. So I always kind of wonder, because I want to do this. There's more that I want to do as well, but somehow just trying to get different perspective transmitted out there rather than the same echo chambers that have constantly been going around. You know, I thought that would be useful. I could be wrong, but there's no point in fretting about that now because I'm here. And if you're here, thank you for joining me. If you aren't watching this on YouTube and you're listening to this on a podcast streaming platform, well, shouts out to you. Right now I'm on Reddit. I was looking through the news, just trying to get some headlines, just trying to look around because, you know, I've been actually kind of unplugged for a little bit. I did listen to Trump. I don't know what it was. Somewhere between a rally, a press conference, and a press briefing. I think I said press conference twice, didn't I? Somewhere between a rally, it was a conference. It was even titled, it was something for the stakeholders. That was another thing that was pretty strange to me. I took a picture of the title of it because I was just so perplexed by how, like, brazen Fox News was being with the title. It says, Trump speaks with stakeholders positively impacted by police. It's such a weird headline and statement in a time when, like, people are looking for some solidarity with, like, defunding the police and ending police brutality, that Trump takes his time to go and speak with stakeholders who are positively impacted by police. Weird. But then people just proceeded to ask him questions because they don't really, like, they asked about Michael Flynn, they asked about Roger Stone, they asked about coronavirus response and testing, and it's just like, okay, is nobody going to talk about police brutality? And I think maybe there was one question, but the whole thing was pretty fucking frustrating, and it made me want to record as soon as I could, but I was at work and I just couldn't go live immediately there and listen to this at the same time. But it was so absurd. So absurd. The whole thing, it was just so incredibly absurd. We've reached, like, absurd levels. Here's the headline. I took a picture of it. You can see it on the YouTube archive here. I got that right there. You can see that it is a picture. You see? Can't click that shit. Oh, it just goes and zooms in. And zoomed in on Kaylee. Yeah, it's titled Live, Trump Speaks with Stakeholders Positively Impacted by Police. It was so weird. Such a weird title. Because, like, he should really be speaking with the communities that have grievances, like Seattle and Portland. So weird. But what do I know? I am just a working class guy. Woo. Got a couple headlines here I might just run through. We have a video of Aurora cop pointing gun at doctor's head prompts excessive force lawsuit, coming straight out of Centennial, Colorado.com. I'm going to scroll down, check it out a little bit. Scroll back up. The doctor seems like a nice enough guy if that's him. I don't know why it would be anybody else. We have it written by Quincy Snowden. Dr. P.J. Parmar, a prominent figure in North Aurora who for years has provided significant resources to local refugees, is planning on suing the Aurora Police Department after an officer held him at gunpoint during a line of questioning on March 1st. Wow. Yep, there appears to be cell phone video here. Clickety link. Shared on Google Photos.
What are you doing?
What did you say?
To send me a routine to...
You're on my property. Leave.
Stay in the car.
No.
Of Galena.
You're in my property. You can get off it now.
It's your property?
I own it. You can get off it now.
Okay, can you show me?
I don't have to show you anything.
Okay, but you first off don't drive up on a police officer that's sitting there like that.
You don't swear at me.
Okay, well...
You don't sit on my property without asking.
I didn't know it was your property.
Please leave the property now.
Okay, well...
You're trespassing. There's signs that say trespassing.
He's just sitting there
I'm not
with the gun
trespassing on
pointing
your
at
property.
Please leave the...
It's the he has the flashlight on the weapon. The flashlight on the weapon is on, and that's what he's using as a flashlight. He has what people on the right would call great trigger discipline. But they have standard flashlights that do not require pistols.
The property. Okay. I got stuff to do. Come on, be on your way.
No, I'm gonna figure out whose property this is first.
Get off the property. I gotta unload crap.
Okay, well, we're gonna figure out whose property this is first.
You do your homework. It's gonna be a hard time getting by your car here.
You know you're going in on the wrong way, too.
You know you're sitting in my property.
1,500 block of Galena.
What's your name? Jay Henderson.
Officer Henderson. So I also clear people off of your property all the time that are trespassing.
He's going inside the building, and obviously he knows all the codes to get inside the building and all that.
You're making it harder for me to serve your community. If you'd get off my property, I'd appreciate it. I got better stuff to do than to placate you on a Sunday night. I'm trying to do some work to help your community here, okay? You can leave now.
The officer just quietly gets back in his car.
Parked in his parking lot.
This should be good.
Type in a report. What are you doing?
That was the end of the video there. He said this should be good, and then unfortunately we didn't get to see the rest of it. But he did immediately walk up to him, Officer Henderson, pointing a weapon. Because he was that freaked out. He didn't really explain what he was doing there necessarily. All he did say was that, he kicks people out of there all the time. Let's see if we can find the officer's defense here. Officers did not complete a standard incident report following their interaction with Parmar A spokesman for Aurora Police confirmed the formal service call that officers initiated began at 6:19 p.m. and was closed 31 minutes later. The only call note was, quote, "need a car, routine," unquote, according to Officer Matt Longshore, spokesman for Aurora Police. Officer Matt Longshore, confirmed that there is an active internal affairs investigation into the incident. It's essentially meaningless. Pamar said he would be remiss not to pursue it. Quote, "These are the sorts of things that, if they're done unchecked, lead to more of it. It's an opportunity to either help decrease it, or by doing nothing, I'm complicit in increasing it." All right. I don't really necessarily... His lawyer says that, quote, "that force may only be used if the officer is in reasonable fear of his life." Dr. Parmar was merely loading boxes into his vehicle on his property when an Aurora officer approached him with a drawn gun. And that's true. The article says here that while Aurora police are required to notify supervisors when they intentionally point a gun or other projectile launcher at a person, officials do not consider such an action of use a use of force per department rules and directives. Huh. I don't know if that's necessarily going to pass in court then. Yeah, he intentionally pointed the gun though. Much of the legal precedent for what constitutes excessive force comes from U.S. Circuit Court decisions, which remain largely split on whether a police officer can enact excessive force without technically touching the subject of a contact, according to an article published in the University of Richmond Law Review. It's pretty interesting. Interesting to know. There's a protest that they did. Well, that's all very fascinating. Not much of a defense from the police. They kind of just were kind of rolling over on that one. Maybe if they had a good reason why that cop was loitering on private property. We have this next article saying, quote, "Alleged Jeffrey Epstein sex crime accomplice Ghislaine Maxwell tried to flee from FBI agents before arrest, prosecutors reveal." No shit. I don't need to really read that. This Greek college student biked 48 days to make it back home to his family when flights were canceled. Oof. That's fucking insane. Dude's gotta be jacked at this point. Oregon, other states putting names of ousted police officers online. Oh, shit. That's gonna start some trouble now, isn't it? French police announce arrest of darknet pedophilia site operator. Alright, let's start with Oregon and other states putting names of ousted police officers, and then we'll look at the pedophilia a little bit, because I know the internet loves pedophilia. But after that, then I got a couple of videos I want to get into, and that's how I'm going to wrap this bitch up.
When was the last time
Hey. No advertisements in my shit. Alright, we got Salem, Oregon. ABC 7 reporting. In the aftermath of the death of George Floyd in police custody, Oregon has released the names of over 1,700 officers whose transgressions over the past 50 years were so serious that they were banned from working in law enforcement in the state. Holy fudge. That's pretty crazy. The online posting last week came after state legislature created a law requiring the Department of Public Safety Standards and Training to establish a statewide public database of officers whose certification has been revoked or suspended. Nice. That's pretty tight. It's that easy. You don't need to hand over the whole database to Bill Barr. You can just give it to the public. Boom. Quote, those who are revoked have tarnished the badge and no longer have the trust of their community, their agency, or our agency as the certifying body, unquote, Department Director Eric Gablix told the Associated Press. The article continues, the website includes a spreadsheet with the names of decertified officers going back to 1971. Holy shit. In at least one instance, a police officer who was decertified in Oregon obtained employment in law enforcement in another state, a situation that some say points to the need for a comprehensive nationwide database, and one that is, and this is me speaking, it should be one that is public. Going back to the article, I think I'm going to... There's an anecdotal evidence here. Former Coquille, Oregon police officer Sean Sullivan was convicted of harassment in 2005 for kissing a 10-year-old girl on the mouth. A year later, he became chief of police of the town of Cedar Vale, Kansas. He quit that job while being investigated there. Good. All right. Yep. So we do need a nationwide database. I would bet, though, that a lot of the officers may have their, like your past employment may be pretty open when it comes to law enforcement. It's not publicly shared. And so then, how do you know that your community is actually safe and being protected by the right kinds of people and not other people who are just taking authority to then abuse power or just, become dirty, nasty pigs? 5 states, Hawaii, Massachusetts, California, New Jersey, and Rhode Island, do not certify officers, and 1, Georgia, does decertify, but doesn't contribute to the registry, said Mike Bakar, executive director of the nonprofit. That nonprofit being the International Association of Directors of Law Enforcement Standards and Training. So we got 5 states do not certify officers. That's pretty dog shit. And then 1 that decertifies but doesn't contribute to the registry. So that's a bunch of dog shit. That just a Catholic Church way of just cycling your bad apples, right? We do need a more comprehensive database, and we do need to make sure that bad apples cannot be employed in positions of power. So, in Colorado, a police reform bill just signed into law mandates creation of a database like Oregon's by January 1st, 2022. Jesus Christ. It's 2020, guys. How the fuck is it going to take 2 years to create a database? Oh my god, you can at least start building it. Maybe they don't want to put that all out publicly, but immediately, but geez, 2 years from now, we're going to get an actual information that might just fuck shit up. We'll see. It's 2 years away. You don't know how the United States is going to be at any point, but a bill working its way through the New York legislature would require a public database containing the names of any officer who's had their employment terminated due to misconduct. And there it is. Ohio has pending bills that would establish a database of records of police officers' use of force. Not quite as far. The terminated due to misconduct, that one's pretty important because then you can at least track people who were terminated due to specific misconducts. But I guess use of force is also... I just don't know why you wouldn't have all 3. Termination due to, or both. Termination due to misconduct and use of force. I don't know why you would just stop at termination. And I don't know why you would just stop at use of force. So, State Senator Lou Frederick, who was among lawmakers who sponsored the database bill in Oregon, said the push needs to go further. Yep, I agree. So, I guess I'm going to read the last paragraph here. New Jersey Attorney General Gruel? Gruwal? Sorry, bro. Like, I'm gonna fuck your name up. Gruwal tried to accomplish at least part of that. Oh, I gotta read this this right here. So, in order to understand the last paragraph, I have to read the preceding or the prior. So, why wouldn't that make sense? Quote, the next step is to have information more broadly available about discipline and complaints, Frederick said, and have a robust system of effective community oversight boards watching use of force activities and hiring transfer policies, unquote. I think it's pretty funny because we have internal investigations. We have that. It's a department in the police. So, of course, you know, it never made sense to have a department of the police investigating the police, but to have a third party that really doesn't have anything to gain from the destruction or bolstering of police forces. But the final paragraph reads, New Jersey Attorney General Gruwal tried to accomplish at least part of that last month by ordering all state, county, and local law enforcement agencies to divulge the names of law enforcement officers who commit serious disciplinary violations. The order is now on hold amid legal challenges from several police unions, because of course it is. Gotta retain those officers, you know? Which we gotta hope at this point is a minority. And without a database, we don't really know. We do know that like 40% are domestic abusers, though. So we do know that. Alright, French police announce arrest of darknet pedophilia site operator coming from France 24. Alright, I might go into the comments of this one. I mean, it's on Reddit. Oh, God. My room is so hot. I got stuck on ice. I'm so sorry. They don't have much AC down here in Poordom. Alright. So this comes by text by Newswires? Yo, did a fucking algorithm write this shit? Newswires writes a lot of articles, and it gotta make me wonder, like, is this their department, or is this, like, an actual algorithm that just writes their news? Because it's very possible it could be a fucking algorithm. I hate to be that fucking paranoid, but, like, when you have your fucking writer credit go to Newswires, alright, I guess I gotta Google it real quick. I love getting off on tangents. It gets me so off. News wires. Says news agency. But it's giving me the definition of a news agency. What's Newswire specifically, though? Newswire services, Newswires AP. A Newswires is an organization of journalists established to supply news reports to news organizations, newspapers. Assignment editor? So maybe it's just like their Associated Press, like, you know. Yeah. I don't know. That's so strange. That's so strange why you would have that as Newswires. Strange. So the article says here, yes, indeed. French prosecutors said Monday that police had arrested a man suspected of operating pedophilia sites on secret darknet internet networks, providing pornographic videos and pictures to thousands of people worldwide. The 40-year-old arrested near the southwestern city of Bordeaux on July 7th was described by prosecutors as, quote, one of the 10 most wanted targets, unquote, of authorities fighting child sex crimes around the globe. Bordeaux prosecutor Frédéric Porterie said the suspect also appeared to have taken, quote, an active role in the production of child pornography pictures and videos, unquote. After being taken in for questioning, he was also charged with the incestuous rape of a minor as well as incestuous sexual assault of a 15-year-old. Huh. The suspect admitted the charges against him. French police and investigators from its specialized anti-violence agency worked alongside the EU's Europol police agency. The suspect posted the images on the so-called quote-unquote dark net of websites that can be accessed only with specific software or authorizations, ensuring anonymity for users. Yeah, they make the dark net seem like it's a lot harder to access than it really is. I don't go to the dark net because I don't really want to jump through the hoops that you can easily jump through to get there. But what a vacuous, empty article. Ghislaine Maxwell has been arrested, and we have just this guy who's been apparently a top 10 most wanted target when it says around the globe here. So it's fascinating that we're not really getting any more information at all. So, wait, what did that video say? Pedophile Hunters UK groups prove efficient, but... What?
A peculiar type of manhunt is underway on the outskirts of Birmingham.
Raphael is quite a dangerous individual, especially with the amount of children that you're speaking to.
This woman is about to meet up with a man she's been speaking to online. But all the while, she was posing as an 11-year-old girl. And together with her group, they're preparing to confront the suspected paedophile.
An image of him, what he's believed to be looking like at this moment. We've verified that through a video call.
Wait, this is just a camera.
They take him outside for questioning.
Have a chat, you're not in anything harm. No one's going to hurt you. Come round here, out of the way. We're here for your online activities that you've been doing. This first message to you, I'm 11. She stated her age straight away.
Sorry for what? You're sorry you've been called, you mean?
In the meantime, they've called the police to alert them about the situation.
No. We've listened to your phone calls. We've read your chats.
Educated, mate. Your chats are...
Do you know what damage it can cause a child, this joking? No, it's not sorry. You can damage these children for the rest of their lives. Don't start with the crocodile tears.
Yeah, we're not interested in that, mate.
The man is handcuffed and taken into custody. Meanwhile, the group passes over copies of the conversation to the police.
Fascinating.
I've got the videos. We've got
Fascinating. It's just a group of people doing fucking... I forgot his name now. The Catch a Predator guy. Fucking Chris Hansen. Chris Hansen's work being passed on to just fucking any NGO that's willing to go out there and do the work. Yeah. That's pretty cool. In a lot of ways, not cool. But I guess Batman's a pedophilia. I guess that's cool, but like, I don't know. Are they ever gonna stumble against like an actual like nefarious plot, like something on the level of Jeffrey Epstein? Because that would be great. Like punching down on poor pedophiles, while it does save some lives, it's not necessarily on the same scale as systemic pedophilia, which, you know, I can't really prove because any attempt to do so would probably be in the realm of conspiracy theory. But we do know that Jeffrey Epstein had his own way, and we do know it's all very possible. And apparently there is a fight going on globally, and they did, as it says here, they captured in this very same article that they captured somebody who was a top 10 most wanted target. Doesn't necessarily say how much he had to do with trafficking as much as he did, like trafficking children as much as he did trafficking. He peddled the videos. So, it would be great if they could take down trafficking, but, you know, also, I don't know, stopping pedophilia in general is a good idea, just to prevent people from harming others, for sure. What a trip. I can't believe there's just a group of people out there just like literally trying to bait people. It makes sense. It makes a lot of sense. I want to go in the comments real quick just because I want to see what people say. about this specific vacuous article that really didn't have much to say. It just says, more of this worldwide, please. Quote, somebody else said, they caught another French guy who went to Indonesia to molest children. He just allegedly killed himself in jail. Died after a suicide attempt. Doesn't really sound like an attempt. Sounds like he quite successfully pulled it off. That's funny. Yeah, somebody posted that article about French guy going to Indonesia. And then they're splitting, getting pretty semantic on the fucking committing suicide. I mean, he might have hung himself. The bedsheet noose broke, and then on the way down, he hit his head on the cement floor and died. Okay, we're splitting hairs on that as well. This is why the Wayfair conspiracy stuff is so dumb and damaging. They don't need to use numerology or coded language or any bullshit like that to operate. The darknet exists. VPNs. Ways to hide activities and communicate. Not to mention, the biggest traffickers aren't celebrities or billionaires. Groomers are, unfortunately, usually close to the victims, parents, relatives. Teachers, coaches, doctors, priests, not Tom Hanks, for fuck's sake. Here it is. Someone else just said, this is the first time I'm hearing about the Wayfair thing. So Wayfair went to all the trouble of partnering with child traffickers, but then used the victims' real names. My only hope is that this will draw attention by non-conspiracy theorists to missing persons cases that otherwise don't get a lot of media attention. Yuritsa is still missing, as far as I know. Olivia was sadly found deceased not long after she went missing. She drowned in a local pond. The only missing Naraya I could find was abducted by a non-custodial parent in 2016, then returned safely a few days later. So Mia went on Facebook Live to tell people she was alive and well, and not involved in any cabinetry-based sex ring. The second part of it, that if you research the product codes, it brings up underage girls, it doesn't. Yeah, and then people are kind of going through and just debunking Wayfair a bit. I think somebody quoted cabinetry-based sex ring and asked, what timeline am I living in? It's pretty funny. Yep. Down with pedophiles. Can't really defend the behavior. But also down with this next guy who might be in the same boat as pedophiles, in my personal opinion. Kind of fucked up thing to say, but when we get to his video, yeah, maybe you'll understand why.
So unless y'all been living under a rock, there's been a new favorite word in 2020. It's called privilege. Let me explain to y'all what privilege really is. You ain't get the definition from anywhere else, you're gonna get it right here. Privilege is wearing $200 sneakers when you ain't never had a job. Having $300 Beat headphones, living on public assistance. Privilege is having a smartphone that you receive no bill for. Living in public subsidized housing where you have no water bill when the rise in property costs and rents and energy have absolutely no effect on the amount of food you can put on a table. Privilege.
Whoa. The first couple of things, those are material things. So I don't really think what anybody's talking about privilege. They're talking about having things like iPhones and
$200 sneakers when you ain't never had a job.
$200 sneakers when you never had a job. That's a privilege. How? Like, it still depends on how, like, you got those shoes. But I guess, you know, because you can compare it to somebody who's, like, you know, working at a Nike, working at a Nike sweatshop and they can't afford the shoes. It's quite possible. You're more privileged than that person. But that's not the kind of privilege we're usually talking about here, buddy.
Having $300 Beat headphones, living.
It's the same logic.
Living on public assistance.
Having $300 headphones, living on public assistance. Now, he might know people personally, but I could assume too. Like, I got Beat headphones for Christmas one year. They were a gift. I would probably never drop that much money on headphones. Just not my way of doing things. But boy, it is a privilege to have those, because I don't think I would have been able to get them without them being gifted to me. So, is that what he means? And if so, how is gifts bad? I thought gifts were good things. What was that thing about low-income housing?
Having $300 Beat headphones, living on public assistance.
$300 headphones, living on public assistance. Yeah, I still don't really know too many people of that, but I feel like he's kind of painting a caricature of somebody specific. Talking about shoes, Beats, low income.
Privilege is having a smartphone that you receive no bill for.
What program is that?
Living in public subsidized housing where you have no water bill.
Public subsidized housing is because you're super poor and you can't afford like normal living. How's that a privilege? To be so poor that you have to have the government's help to pay for your living conditions? Because that doesn't sound like privilege. That sounds like vulnerable. That sounds like suffering in a lot of ways. Like if you were to not have that truck and all you had was a studio apartment that somebody else had to help you fund, I'm sure you wouldn't be in this position of talking about how privileged you are.
When the rise in property costs and rents and energy have absolutely no effect on the amount of food you can put on a table.
The rising costs of energy have no effect to you putting food on the table. That sounds like a lot of nonsense. Is he talking about food stamps? Because again, that's subsidized living. That's like making your life cheaper because you're so poor you can't afford it in normal standards. But like, I know he would be more supportive of like pulling yourself up by your bootstraps, but like that's ignoring a lot of material conditions and ignoring the fact that that is an impossible task to complete, and it is only a conservative talking point to ignore the material conditions. So I'm only 40 seconds in.
Privilege is the ability to go march and protest against anything that triggers you.
Privilege is the ability to go protest and march against anything that triggers you. I don't think any of that's happening, but I am fairly certain that our Constitution says that it is actually a right to protest. But is this the same talking point where living in America is actually a privilege? Because if that's the fact, then privilege means not allowed to criticize the government. And if you're not allowed to criticize the government, we're not really living in a democracy. And if we're not really living in a democracy, then we're living in a lie, a bold-faced lie that everybody keeps perpetuating because they don't want to face the truth.
And not have to worry about calling out of work or what kind of repercussions that might have on you.
I don't know who has that problem. Yeah, I don't know anybody that has that problem who can just say, like, hey, I'm going to a protest, you can't fire me because of it. I don't think that's a thing.
Privilege is having as many children as you want, regardless of your employment status.
He's obsessed with employment and income. But he's really focused on people who don't have employment and have low income. These are people who he sees to be privileged for these really weird reasons, because they have a ton of kids in another low income situation. That sounds like a pretty situation to me. Like, I'm so fucking poor, I would actively avoid having kids because I wouldn't want to force them into my poverty. My poverty is not a privilege. So yeah, I am extremely confused on who he is painting as privileged, other than just like this seems like a smear campaign on certain archetypes that have been built into his red neck.
Privilege is sending your kids to school for the before school programs and the breakfast you get, and keeping them there for the after school programs at no cost to you, paid for the people who do have to deal with rising taxes and costs.
Did he really think he just schooled us on that? Yeah, I don't know who's not paying taxes. But you know what's a good point here is that it's probably, at least it's not black people that he's criticizing here, because white people are the majority on welfare. So, you know, at least we know he's not attacking like the majority of people who are on these subsidized programs. Although low-income housing is in a lot of states that is predominantly black, and it also depends on what state too, but nationwide per capita you do have more white people on welfare and subsidized programming. So yeah, so he's definitely not just shitting on black people right now. He's definitely not just doing that. He's just shitting on dumb poor people like me, the poor dumb rebel. Hey,
I've had the privilege of working hard and living a life of obeying the law.
The privilege to work hard. All right, that's how I know when we're cut from different cloths. Productivity and work, man, it's one hell of a thing, and I feel like a lot of people are trapped in a situation where they are working in a slave wage labor, and it has a lot to do with, while yes, you can choose your employer, not a lot of times your employer has a lot more choice in choosing you than you do in them. But also the fact that if you don't work, you starve, or you die in the cold or in the heat, or you can't pay for the water. So, you know, we've already had this conversation for a while now, whether or not existing in a capitalist system is all that voluntary. And a lot of people have come to the conclusion that it's really not, and it works in a very shadowy, subtle, coercive way. So, if I am to believe what he is saying here is true, it's all pull yourself up by your bootstraps, and if you can do that, then you're privileged. But it's an impossible act to mask the fact that a lot of us have different material conditions that create roadblocks, if not obstacles, in the way to what people in America would deem as success. So him to call these people privileged that are of obviously lower income outcomes, it's very funny that he calls them privileged just because they have things, like basic, just dumb little things like headphones, $200 sneakers. Like, yeah, that's excessive, but like, he's so focused on the material that you have, making you privileged, and not necessarily your socials, your social status, which, you know, when we talk about privilege in a lot of ways, there's a very massive wealth privilege and a very massive white privilege, which I kind of have to assume he's in both camps there. I can see him and he's white, but I'm just going to assume he's rich because he has a very huge disdain and contempt for poor people. So let's just keep going.
Law. I made my own privilege. You know what it's called? It's called hard work.
I want to just rewind that again.
I've had the privilege of working hard and living a life of obeying the law. I made my own privilege. You know what it's called? It's called hard work.
He had the privilege of working hard, and he lived the life of obeying the law. And then he made his own privilege. And you know what that privilege is called? Hard work. He said hard work for the same privilege. Like, privilege is work. Work is freedom. Oh, okay, I get it now.
I've got a nice house, a bunch of land, a bunch of toys out there on that land. Ran around with some of the biggest celebrities in country music and did it starting from the back of a dadgum tailgate. Accumulating over 130 million views now, 750,000 social media followers.
Wait. Just because he earned it doesn't necessarily mean it's his privilege now. Like, he earned it in the past, but anything in the time since, that wouldn't be considered privilege? Starting from the bottom, and now I am never going to be privileged because I started from the bottom. He said he created his own privilege, which he calls hard work. Hard work is his privilege, right? This is, yeah, it's all just pull yourself up by your bootstraps ordeal. When he actually has the material conditions right now to have a much easier life than anybody who is on subsidized housing or food stamps. So just because he started in the back of a tailgate, I don't know his material conditions anything beyond that. He could have been a millionaire for all I fucking know, and he was a nobody who started at the back of a tailgate. But just because you were a nobody doesn't mean you built something into nothing. You just went from being a nobody millionaire to a somewhat somebody millionaire. So go fuck your ego?
That took me over 10 years of grinding like there's no tomorrow, with the hope that there was a light at the end of that beautiful capitalist tunnel. If you work every day and live within your means, your privilege is going to be your family, what you've earned, that nest egg enjoying the one-day retirement that you'll have. But I guess what they want to say now is you're privileged if you stayed in school and got a job and worked hard and contributed to society and stayed out of trouble and you weren't a burden to anybody else. That means you're privileged now. It's something else, America. The good news is this will all backfire. Mark my words. There it is. That's the real definition of being privileged, and you ain't gonna hear it on CNN. Take it or leave it.
Yeah, that was terrible. Check out Buddy Brown's music. What garbage. Easily just so conflated and delusional that he can't actually see any privilege compared to conditions that anybody else might be stuck in. I don't know what kind of school he went to, but being where you're born and what color of skin you're born into matters a lot in this country. So you have to acknowledge what those privileges are, and not just the things that make you jealous when poor people have them. That's all I could think of. But I wanted to move on to my final piece here, my final segment before I hop off, because I can only do very short time constraints because that's how my podcast is going to upload it. So I wanted to get into the Daily Wire's Sunday special segment called The Intellectual Dark Web. And the reason why I want to watch it a little bit is because Some More News, one of my favorite left tube channels on YouTube, did a video called How to Pretend Systemic Racism Doesn't Exist, and it actually goes over a lot of rhetoric and I guess propaganda that a lot of what they call intellectual dark web use. And so I thought it was funny that 6 days ago this came out, 1 day ago, so it was 5 days ago. So 5 days before the Some More News video comes out, and then 5 days after that video comes out, How to Pretend Systemic Racism Doesn't Exist, featuring what they call the intellectual dark web: Sam Harris, Dave Rubin, Jordan Peterson, Ben Shapiro, Joe Rogan. That came out 5 days before this video came out from Daily Wire, Ben Shapiro, The Intellectual Dark Web, featuring Jordan Rogan, Jordan Peterson, and more, who I assume is Dave Rubin and Jordan Peterson and Sam Harris. But I'm not sure. I'm probably not going to get through the whole thing, but I thought might as well just dive into the intellectual dark web and see if I get picked up by a black widow. Let's get it.
I got a bigger studio, and then now it's somehow or another it's a business.
There's a deep desire right now in a free society to try and figure out why some people succeed and some people fail, and we're never allowed to say that there are natural issues at stake. And I understand the resistance to it based on race, right? So for example, you see a lot of people who will say you can't ever talk about racial differences in IQ because that is going to lead toward this racist conclusion that your race defines your IQ, which is, a silly conclusion. Like, there are racial differences in IQ based on kind of group statistics, but that has no relevance to the particular individual standing in front of you. And so you saying this black guy is stupid because he's black is racist. You saying there are group differences in IQ because every study ever done has shown group differences in IQ, not even based on racial groups necessarily, but based on different groups generally between.
It's so funny that Ben is trying to get Joe Rogan to admit to eugenics. This is like the first idea that he comes out talking about like how you can't equate IQ to characters until you get to know characters, right? You can't say this guy is dumb because he's black. You have to say this black guy is dumb because, right? But Ben is also saying that you are able to say black people are dumb because there are racial IQ differences. Let's hear Joe's response. I'm not sure. I haven't actually watched this yet. I just know that it came out and I was super excited to cover it. And I like going in cold into these things. I don't want to be planned. I just want to hear and try to take it in and then see what comes out.
Between age groups, there are differences in IQ actually. If you show that, at least from young age to like 12, if you mention any of these things, then you're overriding the idea of a tabula rasa human being who can be created in whatever image you want. Like, what people really want is to correct the cosmic imbalances, as Thomas Sowell says. I don't know what.
I mean, the Greeks, right? Greek mythology thought man was made out of clay, so that sounds pretty malleable to me.
What do you think is behind it?
I think you're hitting the nail on the head, and I think there's a tremendous amount of white guilt involved in it as well. I mean, because basically what the IQ tests are showing when they do study differences in IQ and races, you're showing the rise of the superiority of the Asian race. I mean, Asians dominate those things, and everybody just sort of just like, well, that's let's not talk about that. Let's talk about white and black because that's more convenient and it's easier, and they could find a victim and they could find a perpetrator. And
well, because one is like an evil racism, while another is just like a chaotic racism. Like, nonetheless, nonetheless, just because there is the stereotype of the smart Asian, it doesn't make it not racist. It's the same thing as assuming that a black person's IQ is dumb because they're black. Like, you're assuming an Asian's IQ is high because they're Asian. It's the same thing. And it's also weird that people fight whatever. He doesn't fight for white supremacy, but I'm getting a little lost here in my own thought, so I might as well just drop it. I just think it's fascinating that Rogan is going down this road of that, yes, race has to do with how you perform in the world. But is that because of internal variables, or is it external? We could say that Sam Harris has argued that it's 50 to 80 for the fact that your genetics have to do with your conditions. But melanin being the genetic that decides this? Not sure.
What you're also seeing, like, there's a lot of Asian groups that are furious because they're getting discriminated against about getting into colleges and universities. They have higher standards because they have such a high percentage of Asians that are getting into the universities. And it's very strange because they're not vocal about it, and they're not publicizing it, and they're not screaming racism in the streets, but they're the victims of it. They actually are the victims of hard work and success and excellent genetics.
Right. Well, there's
hard work, success, and excellent genetics. This is such a white supremacy argument. It's so fascinating. It argues in his favor while also making white people look slightly inferior.
There's no question, and the differences in culture are really the place where we should be putting most of our focus, because when it comes to natural imbalances, there's only so much that you can do, right? I'm not going to be fighting you in a ring anytime soon because I'd just get destroyed. But but when it comes to cultural differences, that's the stuff that we can correct for. And instead of doing that, what we tend to do is we tend to pretend that the cultural differences are not brought about by immediate decision making by parents or by immediate communities. It's something out there, right? It's racism in the ether, or it's discrimination writ large. It's something out there. We can't put our heads around it exactly. It's something that's making us imbalanced. And so the way to fix that is by getting rid of all imbalances that we see. And so if there's an imbalance between men and women, we'll just...
He's talking about inequality, like social inequality, as if somehow like culture is at fault for that, and yet he can't pin down what it is that it is about culture, like certain cultures that belong to certain peoples, what it is that makes these inequalities. It's the culture of racism and white supremacy, Ben.
Just pretend that doesn't exist anymore, and that it must have been caused by something that we can't quite control.
Yeah, it's definitely not an objective way of approaching the issue. I think there's a host of different factors that play into every community, right? There's the echoes of the poor behavior of the people that lived there before you, all the consequences of other people's actions that have affected all the people around you, people going to jail, people that have experienced racism, people...
Joe Rogan actually being slightly enlightened here by talking about historical materialism to the slightest fucking degree.
That have experienced poor treatment by law enforcement, massive distrust around you, very difficult to excel in those environments. You're constantly like running away from gangs and headed home. I don't think we should hold those people up to the same standards as we should people that grow up in very safe middle-class communities where they don't have to worry about all this stuff. I think there's a bunch of different factors, and everybody's looking for one.
Exactly.
And the one factor that appeals to their ideology.
Yeah.
I think that's a real problem.
It's
yeah, but like also you have to like acknowledge intersectionality, because he says that everybody focuses on one, but I feel like people come to him and say, hey, that's not the only problem. Like they all kind of weave together in this gross, what you would call a web.
It's a problem also, anytime you mention IQ, everybody goes nuts, because immediately they suggest that what you're saying is racist.
Mm-hmm.
And the truth is that
it's completely arbitrary it's an only an understanding in the way that we understand what mathematics and our history and English. I don't know what they even test the IQ on, like what they use for the rubrics of testing the IQ, whether it's grammar or math. But, like, it is all based on our thought. We fucking made it up.
Whatever IQ differentials there are, it's unclear how much is explained by genetics and how much is explained by environment. But some is clearly explained by genetics and some is clearly explained by environment. As soon as you say that, everybody suggests that you are operating in a racist space. So it's as you say, when it comes to data, like this happened with Sam Harris when he was being interviewed by Ezra Klein. Right?
Yeah, but, like, when you're equating that, like, people's skin tone is what makes them closer to the... Hold on. Take it back.
Explained by environment. As soon as you say that, everybody suggests that you are operating in a racist space.
Oh, okay.
So
it is a bit racist to use biology in a way to describe that certain races are inferior. Because you always keep saying how you only want to judge somebody by the character of the person rather than the color of their skin. And yet you can't eliminate your own implicit bias to acknowledge that skin tone has nothing to do with the genetics, like the genetic performance, because what we're talking about here overall too is productivity. So like again, that's another form of just Western thought coming into everything, and it has a very massive uselessness in trying to judge whether or not communities of people, which are becoming multicultural as we fucking speak. Like, we have African Americans, we have Asian Americans. That in itself is a splitting of cultures. Holy shit. Like, it's just unbelievable, like, how they can't recognize that it's racist to move genetics in a way to say that a certain race, something we've made up, makes them inferior or superior, when it is probably more dependent on the DNA and the RNA and the chromosomes. That's probably what it's more dependent on, and your brain neurochemistry. So it sounds like more to do with individuals rather than specific groups. But Ben would say no, it's culture. So it's not actually like people within the individuals that make the community. It's the culture that comes out of that community. That's what leads to these poor outcomes. And again, that's not necessarily true either. He just sees that the people should conform to his cultural values, which are Judeo-Christian, very orthodox and traditional cultural values, conservative as well. And unfortunately, Ben, not everybody's going to be able to conform to that in the name of productivity and profit. It's a pretty benign and mundane and a lot of times insufferable existence. So people are going to resist that whether you like it or not, and they are going to live lives and express the universe in ways that you cannot comprehend because all you can see is numbers. So, and race. You see race.
It's as you say, when it comes to data, like this happened with Sam Harris when he was being interviewed by Ezra Klein. Right? Ezra Klein just went after him for suggesting that science is science. Well, science is still science, even if you don't like the science, and it seems like the same thing should apply when it comes to biological differences.
You didn't.
Do you want to see a more active government or a less active government? Because I'm kind of happy with the gridlock, I'll be honest with you. I kind of like the fact the government isn't doing anything.
There's definitely some pros to that. I think it would be better if we had a more competent system. And I agree with you that the checks and balances we've shown that he can't just throw everything out and just run Trump mania all across the country. I think there's definitely some positive to that gridlock.
So it's okay, so what changes would you make to the system? Because you talk about the system being a problem. So you talked about online voting. Do you mean online voting direct on issues, or you mean online voting for representatives?
All the above.
Okay, so you like the referendum system in California?
I think if you have opinions on things, I mean, first of all, this is really unpopular. I think you should have to show that you have an understanding of what you're voting on. You should probably have to
I'm
take
fine
a
with
test.
this. If you want to get rid of the ID requirements and retain the actual you need to know what you're talking about requirement, I think I could live with that.
I think you should take a test. And if you understand what the consequences of your decision are, you understand what is being voted on, then
I think this is kind of unfair because we have many actors, including Rogan and the man that he is talking to, Ben Shapiro, misinform and disinform people. So when you get that kind of information mixing going on, you're not going to have well-informed voters. You're going to have misinformed voters. It's been said that people who watch Fox News are significantly less informed than people who don't. So a lot of people probably, maybe, from Fox News would not be able to vote unless, say, someone with nefarious goals actually gets into the position to change the requirements. If they change the requirements saying that everything Fox News says is true, then they're actually back into the Overton window of truth, which shouldn't be how the way truth works. But they would be in the place to be, and you would have to watch their broadcast to get an informed position and able to vote. But when we know, in reality, right now as we speak, Fox News is the leading misleader of news, of information. So, not good. Not good.
And you can vote on it. But if you just read, if you just go check yes, check no, just do it haphazard just because you're a crazy person and you happen to be 18.
No. See, and that's the thing, though, is that if we're going to live in a full frontal democracy, like, everybody needs to be able to vote, no matter of how informed or how misinformed they are. We can't really control the flow of information. We could do a hell of a lot better job because right now we have a president who kind of capitalizes on conspiracy theories, QAnon. But if we do have a more better centralized flow of true, authorized, vindicated, maybe peer-reviewed information, then we have better understanding from the public, right? But there's never going to be a way that we're going to not have disinformation and misinformation mixing in the melting pot. There's no way of avoiding it. It's impossible. But to knock people out of the voting block just because they don't understand the issues going on, that's not necessarily just on the individual's fault. So it's also weird that Joe Rogan is always constantly bouncing in between historical materialism and material conditions, and then also to, like, you need to pull yourself out by your bootstraps. Wait, where the fuck are your boots? Go buy some fucking boots. Now pull them up.
I think that's pretty ridiculous. But to have a test and have someone say, well, you have to be required to understand, have a rudimentary understanding of what you're talking about in order to make an opinion that could literally affect 300 million people. A lot of people would say that's bad Because then what about, are you saying that people have to have a certain intelligence level in order to vote? Is this like, are you at the door of eugenics? Like, where are you going with this? Well, I think it's not a bad idea to say that if you're going to vote on really important issues, like whatever those issues are, whether it's funding the military or abortion or whatever it is, you should have an understanding of the subject. I don't think that's unreasonable, but people don't want any extra work, and they want things to be very, very convenient.
They want the virtue signaling also. Being able to vote.
That's Ben's love. I do believe a lot of people want things more convenient, and I do find it fascinating that he wants online voting to happen because it would be more convenient. But him yet again throwing blame on people because they're too lazy to be more well-informed, that just says a lot more about Joe's character than it does the individual who he seems to be strawmanning. But I want to just say that if we have better flow of information, we would have a better informed public. It is really that simple.
Half of voting right now is just virtue signaling, like demonstrating to the public at large, to people at large, what this vote means.
It's virtue signaling. You can only really like be evil for so long and just be like, you're the evil ones.
To you. So is Hillary Clinton campaigning on, if you vote for me, you'll show that you voted for a woman. And if you vote for Barack Obama, you've shown that you vote for a black guy. And if you're voting for Donald Trump, you're sticking a middle finger to the system. It's all symbolic voting. Very little of it seems to be about like, what's this guy actually going to do once he's there?
Yeah.
And that's a serious problem.
It's a good point.
One of the biggest episodes ever on Joe's podcast was with our next guest, Jordan Peterson. Jordan is a professor of psychology at the University of Toronto, which is where he was when his first book, Maps of Meaning, The Architecture of Belief, came.
I'm going to be honest. Peterson is a little bit more abstract for me, so I might not be able to do this very well. I am more of a Rogan level of thinking, but I'm still here for this. So totally here for this. This is obviously an old recording pre-corona, but Ben just felt like it was time to upload this with all his buddies. And I'm only going to probably just cover Jordan B and then hop out, so...
came out. Jordan's career took a new direction in 2016 when he became a vocal critic of a new law passed in Canada, Bill C-16, which made gender identity and expression prohibited grounds of discrimination. Jordan published a YouTube series on the law and argued it was compelled speech, meaning it was requiring people to express thoughts they disagree with. The series created tons of controversy and a lot of media coverage for Jordan. Jordan's second book, the bestseller 12 Rules for Life, An Antidote to Chaos, was still quite new when he joined me on the premiere episode of The Ben Shapiro Show Sunday Special. Over the course of 2018, the book exploded. It sold 3 million copies around the world, which took Jordan around the globe, speaking to hundreds of thousands of people and made him a household name. Jordan is an incredible, incredible guy when he speaks. He's introspective, one of the most humble, and get a chance to sit down and talk with him soon again. From our Sunday Special, listen to Jordan give the argument that the human race determines the direction of evolution through their logos, their consciousness, and how we have to value the individual in order to build up and maintain the structure of society or face the consequences of society becoming totalitarian. He and I also discussed the debate of free will and how the existence of consciousness informs it.
Well, we already walked through the fact that the heroes of the past acted on potential to extract out the world of actuality. And if they did that properly, then the world they extracted was good. And that is a divine principle. And then we might say, well, is it a divine principle? And you might say, well, what is it that's acting through people in the good? Mm-hmm. Like the Christian theological answer to that would be the logos, right? That's the idea. Mm-hmm. That's the idea of the Holy Spirit, roughly speaking.
Right.
You might think, well, is that a real thing? It's like, well, to me, it's real the same way that consciousness is real. And we don't know the role of consciousness in determining reality. Mm-hmm. But even if you're an evolutionary biologist.
How quick he did that, just moving symbolic iconography, the Father, the Spirit, and the Holy Ghost, and moving that into just as equivalent as consciousness. Wow. Yeah, I guess, because if you want to talk about it in maybe like Taoist or Zen Buddhist terms, but like you literally just like when you talk about consciousness, most people kind of equate it to their like center, like their awareness, like right here, that's consciousness. And so when you equate things that we thought up about around, 3,500 BC? I can't remember because I think the New Testament came out around like 600 something BC, right? 600 AD, right? I think it was somewhere around 600 AD the New Testament actually had came out. So it's fascinating that, so then what are we going to just chalk that up to discovery? Maybe, but that's probably not where he's going to go with this at all. He's skipping right over that.
And this is so interesting because the evolutionary biologists actually differentiated themselves from Darwin on this point. Like Darwin was very, very forthright in his claim that sexual selection was as powerful as natural selection, or even more so. And so here's where that goes. And because that was...
Is sexual selection even that separate from natural selection? Because I'm pretty sure it's the same thing. Like, sexual selection is just another branching off of natural selection. Natural selection is the combination of the material factors that led to the continuation of genes. So, like, of course, sexual selection has a lot to do with that. Okay, let's get to the point.
Because that brought consciousness into the world as an active player, the materialistic evolutionary biologists ignored that for like 150 years and only concentrated on natural selection, where they could play, well, this is all chance.
Right.
It's like sexual selection is not chance. Okay, so here's a hypothesis. Human beings separated themselves from chimpanzees.
It is a lot of chance.
One of the reasons they did that was because
I want to argue that the chance of someone finding you attractive is a very specific chance, but them picking you, is that a form of divine grace? Because in a lot of ways, divine grace is what Dr. Manhattan once described as a thermodynamic miracle, which is another way of saying coincidence, which is another way of saying probability. So
females are sexually selective. Chimps aren't. Female chimps in estrus will mate with any chimp. The main chimps, the dominant ones, chase the subordinate males away. So they're more likely to have offspring, but it's not because of female choice.
Right.
Now, human females have done this whole different thing, is that they have hidden fertility, and they're much more likely to go after guys who have climbed up the hierarchy. So let's say heroes. We'll give the women some credit for intelligence, right? And say that that's what they're after. Even if they're using wealth and so forth and status as a marker, they're actually using those as a marker for competence.
Yeah, it's a stand-in.
Yeah, and
again, that's all like related to our view of sexual relations. Like there's a bunch of natural selection and sexual selection that's going on without what chimps did he even include? Was it bonobos?
Fertility.
Hold on.
They have offspring, but it's not because of female chimps in estrus will mate with any.
So it's fascinating that chimps are his example because they are the cherry-picked example when we're actually a lot closer to bonobos. So fascinating.
Guys who have climbed up the hierarchy. So let's say heroes. We'll give the women some credit for intelligence, right? And say that that's what they're after. Even if they're using wealth and so forth and status as a marker, they're actually using those as a marker for competence.
Yeah, it's a stand-in.
Yeah, and I think that's I think the evidence. Yeah, I think the evidence for that is clear. Okay. So
the female chimps are using wealth, status, and all of that hierarchy to acknowledge competence. This has nothing to do with Western form of thought, does it? It does. It has everything to do with Western perspective. If we lived in a horizontal hierarchical system, none of that would be of importance to JBP's argument.
So you might say, oh, well, it was human female conscious choice that selected us. Okay, and you think, well, that's not random. That's not random at all. It's the farthest thing from random that there is, and that means consciousness is making its choices with regards to what propagates. But then it's even more complex than that. So here's what happens among men. The men all get together in their hierarchy. They posit a valued goal. They all accept that as the goal, because otherwise they wouldn't be cooperating.
Right.
Then they arrange themselves into a hierarchy, and they let the most competent guys lead because they want to get to the promised land. They want to get the most competent leaders leading.
Right.
Competent defined by that value.
Now, just know he's getting out of Darwinian natural selection here completely. Like, this has not much to do with evolution of a species so much as an evolution of a society, which, you know, we gotta say is different because our species hasn't evolved very much since we've started the whole agricultural revolution, which some could say is the beginning of society. So not much evolution change has come from then. There has been, I guess, selective breeding since then, mostly love guiding a lot of it. I don't think a lot of specific breeding has come out, unless you're talking about people obsessed with Aryan race and purity and all of that. But I think the distinction he's making here is taking a huge shift away from actual evolution theory and just kind of moving into a more of sociology. And it's quite the pivot. And I like also how he equates like women consciousness to the connection of consciousness with God. Like their consciousness is something broader, right? Like their consciousness kind of even connects to the broader outer ephemeral still, but like it's the umbrella of human consciousness that he might be saying, or he's calling all of life consciousness. I'm not really sure, but it seemed like he almost equate to like women's consciousness, that equivalent to the God consciousness, which got me pretty hot and bothered, to be honest.
Okay, so here's what happens essentially. The men all get together and vote on the good men, and the good men are then chosen by the women, and those are the people who propagate.
Again, this is all very specific to our own society. I don't think chimps have elections. How their hierarchy is decided is well beyond me, but also, like, I don't think this is how lobsters would decide it. They also live in a patriarchal, hierarchical society, right? I think that's his thing. Not every species forms their hierarchies like this, nor do they form missions as such. And also, not even our own species throughout time have done it. This is all in the context of modern thought. This is completely blank of all of our nomad days when hierarchy was on a much more horizontal scale, and that was pretty necessary to hunting and gathering, which led us to our brains being able to create society and holding together society with our brains.
And so it's like men are voting on which men get to reproduce, and women are going along with the vote and being even more stringent in their choices, let's say. And so then what you get is that the consciousness that through its active expression transforms the potential of the world into actuality also selects the direction of evolution. Right, and that's where the meme...
It's fascinating how he's able to stick like the kind of the Taoist kind of form of thought too, is that we're all kind of characters in this show. So that's pretty fascinating that he's also able to fit that in there, is that like consciousness is expressing itself through all of us, and this is the mission. This is like, it's almost saying like we're all moving through divine grace, like we are all God's actors. You know, it has a lot to do with destiny. It's fascinating. He doesn't believe in chaos whatsoever.
Dawkins' term turns into the biological reality. It's not this is something that's so cool about Dawkins. It's like, I've often thought this about Dawkins, is if he would push his thinking to the limits, he would fall right into Jung. Well, and then he'd be lost, of course, because that's a whole other universe. But if you take that meme seriously, like, and I mean really seriously, you think, there's some ways of conceptualizing that become so all-encompassing
powerful
that they
hardwire themselves.
That's right. They start to become an actual force of evolution itself. And so then here's the case you could make.
What? Thoughts can become a force of evolution. Like, again, and I gotta say this, humans have not evolved, I think, for millions of years. Like, we're still the same backward-ass species as we've always been. So, I don't think thought has done much for us.
Consciousness extracts the proper world of being from potential through truth, and then it's good. It's like, okay, that's a hard one, man. That manifests itself in human beings at the individual level of individual consciousness. That's the logos within. That's the metaphysical foundation of the idea of natural right and responsibility. Okay, that's a bloody killer idea. That's expressed in the hero of heroes, that idea. That hero of heroes is the driving force behind human evolution. So not only do you get the action of the logos metaphysically as the process that extracts order out of chaos at the beginning of time, you also...
He found a way to put like Nietzschean will to power in front of the force of evolution.
Get it as the major driver of evolution. And so then you ask, okay, then what kind of reality does that have? Because you chase consciousness back, and like it disappears into the mystery of the past, and we have no idea what its relationship is with matter. But it's the force that gives rise to the cosmos and drives evolution.
You're right. We have no no understanding of the relation between an abstract understanding of consciousness and the materials. Oh wow.
It's like you're getting pretty close to God there.
Yeah.
Even just pragmatically speaking.
And you're certainly, not close to, but in the midst of an argument about free will. Because obviously if you make the hard determinist argument that free will doesn't exist and that consciousness is merely a sort of trick that your brain is playing on itself, then how does culture propagate? How do these memes propagate?
Ben says that consciousness is a game. Jesus, your brain playing a game on itself. When Jordan Peterson just got done explaining to him that the existence of God is within him, and he calls it consciousness.
Are people choosing? Sexual selection and natural selection become one and the same as soon as you boil sexual selection down to natural selection. Right, so
well, and also I think the free will argument, I see why Harris gets tangled up in that, because, well, first of all, deterministic arguments are unbelievably powerful. And when we use deterministic models for many things, they really work.
Right.
So you could say, well, we're going to use that by default. It's like, fair enough. We're going to deviate from that with care. But I don't see people as driven like clocks winding down. First of all, we don't wind down in any simple way. We're dissipative structures. To use, he wrote Schrodinger, what is life? A human being is a dissipative structure. We're not an entropic structure like a clock running down. We are in some sense, but as living beings, we pull energy in. And so we're not winding down like a deterministic structure. We're something other than that. And the way we treat each other is as logos, as far as I can tell. The way I treat myself,
That's fascinating. He didn't answer that question at all about free will, and just use very broad, big words to kind of obfuscate the point and then move back to what he was talking about, which is the logos.
If I'm going to be good to myself, in the proper sense, is that I'm an active agent of choice confronting an infinite landscape of potential and casting that potential into a reality for good or for evil.
Right.
Okay. And if I treat myself that way, then I have proper respect for myself and proper fear of myself, because I can make bad decisions and warp the structure of reality. And I think if you read Frankl, for example, or Solzhenitsyn, and you see how your bad decisions can warp the structure of reality, then that wakes you up, right? Okay, so there's that.
Sure.
If you don't treat yourself like an active agent, imbued with logos, then your life doesn't go well. But more, if you don't treat other people that way, they do not want to play with you. If we set up societies that aren't predicated on the idea that people are like that, then the societies they dissolve or they become totalitarian almost instantly. So then I would say, well, you've got the problem of determinism. It's like, fair enough, man. How do you reconcile the fact that if you lay out a society at every level of analysis on strict deterministic grounds, it fails? So doesn't that mean your hypothesis has a flaw? I mean, maybe not. Maybe you can say, no, the facts are independent of the ethical consequences.
Right, exactly. This is where the truth pragmatism question comes back into being, right? Because Sam would say, well, it's true regardless of what the effect is. And you would say, well, it's obviously not true if morals are constructed for a pragmatic reason, and if this pragmatism doesn't work, if it falls into nothingness.
Well, it also depends to some degree on how you're willing to test your hypothesis. Because I might say, well, if your hypothesis is factually correct, wouldn't you assume that if people based their behaviors individually and familial and socially on that set of facts, which is basically what Sam claims about facts to begin with.
So weird. Hypotheses never have facts. I just need to stop that. You can't have a factually true hypothesis.
If you based your ethos on those facts, wouldn't it work?
Right.
Well, he claims that that's a test, and I'd say, well, then it fails that test.
Yep.
It doesn't work. We have.
A hypothesis only becomes fact when it has a conclusion that proves the hypothesis. The conclusion's really the only true part of any experiment. That's okay.
To treat each other like divine centers of consciousness in order for society to work.
Yes.
And I think, well, I can't see any way out of those arguments.
Sam Harris's writings and lectures span...
All right, I don't want to get into Sam Harris because I'm running out of time here. Maybe I'll do it tomorrow, 27 minutes and 21 seconds. Maybe I'll get into it tomorrow just for a little bit of fun. But yeah, Jordan Peterson, like I said, is a bit too abstract for me at times. Like to the point where, like when he was talking about determinism and how to run a society, like I got so lost in the jargon of him trying to explain that question, it made absolutely no sense to me.
For a pragmatic reason, and if this pragmatism doesn't work, if it falls into nothingness.
Well, it also depends to some degree on how you're willing to test your hypothesis.
Yeah, the hypothesis thing.
The problem is I'm to myself, into a reality to myself, nothing other than I'm going to deviate from that with care. But I don't see people as driven like clocks winding life. A human could say, well, we're tangled up in that.
Hold on.
Consciousness is merely a sort of trick that your brain is playing on itself. Then how exactly does culture propagate? How do these memes propagate? How are people choosing? Sexual selection and natural selection become one and the same as soon as you boil sexual selection down to natural selection. Right?
Well, and also I think the free will argument, I mean, I see why Harris gets tangled up in that, because, well, first of all, deterministic arguments are unbelievably powerful. And when we use deterministic models for many things, they really work.
Right.
So you could say, well, we're going to use that by default. It's like, fair enough. We're going to deviate from that with care. But I don't see people as driven like clocks winding down. First of all, we don't wind down in any simple way. We're dissipative structures.
See, like, what are we talking about with this whole clock? This whole clock analogy about us winding down. We don't wind down. We do. It's definitely, you wind up, right? From baby to, let's say, 80 years old, you're winding up, and then from baby to, like, maybe you hit your 50s or maybe you hit your 60s and you start winding down. We do wind down. We wind up and we wind down. So I don't even understand what this has to necessarily do with the free will argument.
To use, he wrote Schrodinger. What is life? A human being is a dissipative structure. We're not...
Dissipative structure. We're not winding down. We're dissipating. That's the same fucking thing. That's like saying that we're not going backwards. We're fading. Like, that's not the same thing. But like dissipating and fading, like that's the same thing. Like, that's a winding down. That's evaporating. Let me make sure. Nope. Alright, it says scattered or dispersed. But also disintegrate. So that's another one. Dissipated. So yeah, it's another way of saying it's a various directions of disperse or dispel. But he's doing this weird circling motion, dissipating. I don't know what the fuck he did with any of this. That hand signal didn't explain anything to humans are Dissipating?
He wrote Schrödinger, What is Life? A human being is a dissipative structure.
What the fuck is this? What is that? A human being is a dissipating structure. This has nothing to do with dissipating. I had to look up the fucking definition just to make sure it didn't.
We're not an entropic structure like a...
See? And then he says we're not an entropic structure. Now, let's make sure we understand the definition here, because like I said, he didn't answer the fucking question. A closed system evolves toward a state of maximum entropy. A doctrine of inevitable social decline and degeneration. Says we're not that.
A clock running down. I mean, we are in some sense, but as living beings, we pull energy in. And so we're not winding down like a deterministic structure. We're
not winding down like a deterministic structure. Maybe determinism has determined that we are kind of doomed to entropy, as he uses the word, or also doomed to decline. I'm not sure it is a natural law, but you know, there's an old saying that says what goes up must come down. But Jordan B. Peterson here believes that human beings are much more than that. That we are better than the dinosaurs. They came up to fall. We did not.
Something other than that. And the way we treat each other is as logos, as far as I can tell. The way I treat myself, if I'm going to be good to myself, in the proper sense, is that I'm an active agent of choice confronting an infinite landscape of potential and casting that potential into a reality for good or for evil. Okay, and if I...
All right, so I guess he is trying to answer the question here of free will, but he's also just saying that he has will to power to decide with the material conditions of whether or not he will commit acts of good or evil.
Treat myself that way, then I have proper respect for myself and proper fear of myself, because I can make bad decisions and warp the structure of reality. And I think if you read Frankl, for example, or Solzhenitsyn, and you see how your bad decisions can warp the structure of reality, then that wakes you up, right?
That's fascinating that he's like, if you read these two other guys, they'll explain to you this point I'm trying to make.
Okay, so there's that. If you don't treat yourself like an active agent, imbued with logos, then your life doesn't go well. But more, if you don't treat other people that way, they do not want to play with you. If we set up societies that aren't predicated on the idea that people are like that, then
funny.
the society...
He's just like really overly explaining myth in order to say like self-respect and respect of others is really important to holding a society together. At no point does he answer anything about free will. None of that. None of that answers the question of how much free will do we have. But he kind of answers the question by saying that a lot of it has to do with what he chooses as an individual. So, yeah, that's a lot of Nietzschean will to power there from Jordan B. Peterson, which, again, maybe I was actually a lot closer. I just have to listen to him a little bit better and I get a better understanding. But at the same time, like, he is generally full of shit and he seems to be stepping into a lot of studies that he really shouldn't be. I think he was originally a psychologist, right? So someone dealing with brains, and somehow he is now full on with philosophy and politics, which I guess some of the greatest have been. I don't remember if Carl Jung was that much into politics, but he seems to really enjoy Jung. I wish maybe he understood Campbell a bit better. But, you know, that's for another day, another conversation. I want to thank you for joining me here on another one of my transmissions. I hope to continue to do this. I like kind of picking brains and analyzing ideas. It's fun for me. I enjoy it. I get off on it. Please join me again for another episode, another transmission. I got a Twitter at working_Andrew. Yeah, I'm gonna keep posting it on YouTube and what was the other one? Anchor, my go-to platform for podcasts because they allow me to upload them for free. And I'm just taking a break from the whole Twitch thing. I'd much rather just do what I'm doing right now. I actually feel pretty good about it. And if you don't like it, you can go love yourself. Thanks for joining me.